That was a nice move by Pipkins, taking it right to the rack himself. Wide open three, left wing, and it's good. Nylon, the dunk likes that, Matt.
A three from the right side, and it's good! The one, Pipkins, the man, yet again.
Hello and welcome to The Flex. I'm Matt St. Jean.
This is Joe Howie.
And we're coming off a tough loss here. Friars travel to UConn and lose 73-61. Friars started this game scoring the first 4 points, then gave up an 11-0 run by UConn. And for the most part, the Huskies never looked back from there. Friars did pull it close at the half. It was a 6-point game at halftime. David Duke hit a three to open the second half to pull it to 3. And once again, the rest of the half was there for the taking for UConn. Friars are now 11-11 on the season, 7-9 in conference play with 3 games remaining, and those tournament hopes are as thin as they've ever been, if they still exist.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, we were just straight up outplayed, is what it comes down to. You and I said when prepping for this game that it was a loss that is permissible by means of the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. It's a road loss against a team that you've already beaten by double digits. So, it's not too upsetting. I think what's upsetting here is the lack of toughness, effort, and discipline down the stretch. And what's disturbing is that now you have to win all 3 of your final 3 scheduled games and then some in the Big East tournament if you want an at-large bid for the Big Dance. That's really what it comes down to. Margin for error is razor thin. You lose any of the next 3 games and you're out indefinitely.
Yeah, and I think with this loss, it starts at the top with David Duke. He's your leader on the floor. He did have double figures, 11 points, but he only hit 3 shots, 3 of 16 from the field. Only 2 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 turnovers. Really just average numbers for the guy who's supposed to be running the show. He looked shut down by Bouknight on defense. Bouknight seemed to have no problem with him at the other end of the floor when they had Duke guarding him. And, I mean, Duke does not look like the athlete that we have seen in the past. He doesn't look particularly explosive right now, I don't think, and seemed like he had a really hard time creating any kind of separation to get his own shot.
Well, I mean, the only positive I'll take away from David Duke out of this performance and quite honestly out of the latter half of the season is that we're very likely going to see him on our team again next season. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very tough for him to make a name for himself in the the NBA coming off of inconsistencies like this. Mm-hmm. Quite honestly, I think it's the result of trying to do too much. You saw even tonight with Bynum and Breed on the floor, Duke is still our primary point guard, which that's a little bit of coaching. That's a little bit of self-infliction. Duke likes to have the ball in his hands. Really, the offense isn't going to flow, and you're forcing opportunities for yourself when you do that. So really, it's very, very simple. If you keep him off of the ball and you draw up plays that are designed to get him open, he will score more. But when you have him running the point, when you have 2 other point guards on the floor, it's very difficult to get him to do 2 things at once. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw Bynum back in this game. He got significant playing time. I mean, it's 14 minutes, so it's something. For the most part, though, I don't think you noticed a massive difference when Bynum was on the floor with how the offense played. And I mean, what we've seen from Ed Cooley offenses is that having guards that can create their own shot is what's needed. And this team clearly doesn't really have guards that can create their own shot. Bynum does every once in a while create nice little looks for himself, especially in the mid-range game. And Breed certainly doesn't really have a problem creating shots for himself. Duke and Reeves, though, for as big as they are, they don't really, at least as of late, we haven't seen them be able to use their size or their speed or quickness to create shots. And then just going off of this, one thing you noticed, you look at the box score, David Duke only took 3 3-pointers. He made 1 of them. And down the stretch, the second half, the Friars lost this game by 12 points. We're trailing by double digits for most of the second half. They only took 4 3-pointers in the second half. How are you supposed to mount a comeback if you're not even attempting shots from the outside? And AJ Reeves was hitting them. He had a good day from beyond the arc.
I'm really glad you said that, Matt, because I feel like our game plan in the first half offensively and our game plan in the second half offensively were two completely different game plans.
Mhm.
Completely different. In the first half, it seems like we were drawing plays for Reeves to score the ball outside, right? We were even drawing plays for Horkler to score the ball outside. Gant took a three. And then in the second half, that went away. And in a second half where it seems like UConn got countless 3-point opportunities under the rim, it's like if you breathe near a UConn player, you get an N1, you get an N1.
Mhm.
Why aren't we drawing up threes for guys that can hit them? It's not like Reeves is in this slump anymore. He's been hitting threes consistently. Drop a play for him.
Yeah, no, I mean you're absolutely spot on. Reeves was 2 for 4 from beyond the arc. Didn't attempt a 3-pointer in the second half. And you really got to wonder what the game plan is. There, part of that's crediting the UConn defense. They came out and played the perimeter aggressively at points, but that's also because, I don't know, I tweeted this during the game. The Friars just did not look athletic enough to play with UConn. UConn was too big and too fast at the same time. Friars couldn't separate to create their own shot and couldn't bully their way into shots underneath like we've seen Watson do time and time again, and often looked simply overwhelmed. I mean, we talked to John Fanta about how Noah Horkler looked at points this season, coming up to play Big East opponents. That's how the whole team kind of looked tonight, I thought. It's almost like we were a mid-major team playing up against a team in a higher conference.
Yeah, you're right. And what adds insult to injury is we out-toughed and out-bigged and outplayed this team 6 days ago. Like
Mm-hmm.
this, it's not like this was some surprise. It's not like a Cook played 35 minutes. You know how
But
many minutes he
one,
played? One, a single minute. So it's not like they changed anything with respect to their interior play. The only difference was James Bouknight tonight, and that kid had a hell of a night, but he played 24 minutes. He didn't even play the full 40, and he got hurt. So
yeah,
really, it's not like anything changed inside. And when I say inside, I mean 3 to 5. Nothing changed there. So I don't know why our game plan was so different and why the outcome was so different in the paint. It's
yeah.
mind boggling.
No, it absolutely is. Like Tyrese Martin had a better game, and RJ Cole had a better game. So you can credit the two of those guys. But yeah, Whaley, Sunogo, Jackson, Carlton, especially Carlton and Polly, they combined for 16 points. Carlton, he had 7 rebounds, and I don't know when he was on the floor, whether it was Croswell or Watson at the 5 for the Friars, neither one of them could get a shot, and usually Carlton would kind of be the rim protector, and one of the other big guys for UConn would come over and smother whoever was under the rim, and they'd have to kick out somewhere, and then UConn would just set up the defense again. And I mean, I think what a lot of it comes down to is the Friars don't have a guy who can create his own shot, so there's nobody to put pressure on the defense. UConn can just come up and smother everything. You don't have to worry about, all right, well, if we play them too aggressively, they're going to get behind us and get to the rim. Or if we play them too conservatively, they're going to hit 3-pointers. There really isn't any aspect of this Providence attack that's threatening.
Yeah, I mean, I think at times Duke and Watson have held those characteristics and shown them,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems as if every team in the Big East has some sort of blueprint on how to shut them down.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
and I
really
think, I
no other
mean,
way to say it.
yeah, and if you look at the box score, Bynum only played 14 minutes. He still hit 2 shots and got 4 points. Gant contributed 6 points. Horkler had 9. Reeves had 9. And Breed led the team with 14. And we're going to talk about Breed a little bit more. But we've said all season long what Duke and Watson need around them is a full team that is playing well and can support them. And with the exception of some of the paint play, they really did get it tonight. They had some of the role players playing well, and it was Duke and Watson that didn't show up. I don't know how much of that is maybe these guys are at their cap. Maybe Bouknight is just that much more talented than David Duke and that much better. Maybe guys like Tyrese Martin and all of these bigs for UConn are that much better than Watson. But if you went back 2 months in time and said that these guys, especially Duke and Watson, are going to look overwhelmed in Big East play from a talent perspective, I think we'd all be surprised right now.
Well, here's the problem, Matt, with tonight and with what you just said is that Duke and Watson are not that much worse, or rather, the guys on Connecticut are not that much better than Duke and Watson. We've seen Duke and Watson put up 30 points and put on offensive clinics in conference play, mind you. Not just like any old Fairleigh Dickinson team. In conference play, we've seen each
Yeah.
of these players have two 25-plus point nights, each of them. They own a pair. Duke has a pair. Nate has a pair. So it's not like these guys are not talented or can't compete. What it comes down to is toughness. And when I say toughness, I mean defensively tough. When you're getting killed in the rim, in the paint, when you're getting killed and you can't apply pressure to guys on the dribble drive or guys near the rim, it's deflating. It's mentally draining, and it takes a hit on your mental toughness. And then offensively, you're frustrated because you're giving up a ton of points on the other end and you can't score and you're not cohesive. Right now, this team struggles with toughness.
Yeah. This was the soft Friars team that Ed Cooley had been talking about, and I don't think there's any two ways about it. This team played soft tonight, as they've done. Gave up 46 points in the paint, gave up 16 offensive rebounds. I mean, you look at some of these numbers too, like some of the stuff in the box score doesn't look that bad. The Friars turned the ball over less than UConn did, but points off turnovers were the same. And offensive rebounds, the Friars still got 12 offensive rebounds. Friars actually had 13 second chance points to UConn's 8, even though UConn had 4 more offensive rebounds. But at the end of the day, I mean, points in the paint, 46-28, Huskies advantage. Fast break points, 13-7, Huskies advantage. UConn had 6 blocks, and that was enough. I mean, this was just it wasn't a dominant performance from UConn. I wouldn't go that far, but it was a steady performance. It was decisive. UConn was clearly the better team for probably 35 out of the 40 minutes.
Contrary to what the play-by-play commentator was trying to create with his words, this wasn't UConn beating the crap out of us. I mean, we held our own very, very, very minimally, and I say that because the ball bounces UConn's way 2 more times, and I would agree that this was a blowout. But I think to be down by as much as, 18, 19 points, and then to only lose by 12 is a testament, one, to our ability to stay in it late, and really not even our Alan Breed's ability to stay in it late, which is what I'm trying to get to here. If it wasn't for him, this was a blowout because he's the only player that showed up today, the only one.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he's the only player that was routinely fearless enough to take the ball to the rim, was able to finish through contact, was able to set himself up for good opportunities. And, I mean, you look at the last 30 seconds of the game. I mean, the shot clock's off. The Friars were down by 12, and he's still running around trying to foul somebody because he wants to keep playing. He wants to have a chance. I mean, Ed Cooley found a good one there. This kid's going to be good. But, I mean, Ed Cooley just said in the post-game press conference, quote, "This was a street fight, and they are victorious in the street fight. They're more physical than us. The urgency and purpose in our guys, we just didn't have today." And I think you contrast this team to last year's team. We've talked about how it was the seniors that led the team last year. It's not a good look for the team when it's the lone freshman who's playing that has the most energy and the most urgency in a road conference game that you need to make the NCAA tournament late. That's really bad.
Matt, for comparison, 1 year ago yesterday, February 15th, was the Providence Seton Hall game at the Dunkin' Donuts Center, where Providence beat 10th ranked Seton Hall. The students stormed the court, but the game wasn't really over because Greg Gant fouled with like a half second left on the clock. Everyone knows that tale, and everyone knows what happened next. It sparked a 6-game win streak to ricochet the Friars comfortably into the Big East, into the NCAA tournament as a projected 7 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly 1 year later, we drop one in what could have been a 3-game winning streak, a 2-game road winning streak, and now we sit a very tough gauntlet in the face, whatever you want to call it. We sit 3 very difficult games ahead of us. I mean, it's a completely different story and a completely different mentality by this team.
Yeah, and the thing that stands out to me about that last year, I mean, look at the start of that game. The Friars went on a 28-3 run at one point. We're up 28-5. They came to play from the get-go. They came out with energy and just kind of steamrolled Seton Hall at points that game. Obviously, it ended up finishing as a 3-point game. But, I mean, most of that first half, they just controlled it. And Seton Hall tried to battle back, but the Friars were way ahead of them. The Friars did that a couple times last season, just getting out to a really hot start or going on these really, really cohesive runs during games. And that's what you talk about mental toughness. When the Friars get down, last year they put together runs. This year they kind of fall apart and turn more to hero ball and stuff, which is more like 2019 than 2020.
The Creighton game at Creighton, when Creighton was ranked 11th and we won by 4, 74-70. We went on a very big run to start the game, and it was that game where I was texting you. It reminded me of the Seton Hall game from last season. We were playing with a sense of urgency on offense. We were playing locked in, tight defense. Excuse me. But not to mention, Seton Hall came back and was scratching at the door. It wasn't like a big blowout game in the end. Well, while we did hold a very comfortable double-digit lead, Seton Hall came back, and so did Creighton. But our defense was so stout that we never lost the lead. And quite honestly, Matt, that game, the Creighton game on the road, is the one time this season that I felt like this team had any heart or any desire to win a big game. Other times I feel like we fold very quickly.
Yeah. And I think I don't want to point too many fingers or anything, but when you go back to 2019, for long stretches of that year, they were kind of trying David Duke at the point guard as a freshman, and we all kind of chalked it up to, all right, well, he's overwhelmed right now. Well, he's a junior. He's gotten time to develop, and last year we saw how he could play, and it looks like he can't quite shoulder the load. I mean, you got guys that are playing well around him, and he's going up against a guy like Bouknight. Bouknight was ranked lower than him as a recruit, and is a year younger, and is coming off an injury, and is just coming out as clearly the superior player. And that's, I mean, Bouknight's really good. I'm not going to use that to take away from Duke, but I feel like we've been kind of waiting for Duke to take that jump to the next level. And instead, the more we've gotten into this season, the more he's faded. I don't know if that's an energy thing. And I will say, with COVID and the way that impacts college students and their lifestyle and your social life for somebody that's 21 years old, that's going to have an impact on it. It's going to impact your development. It's going to impact your mentality. So I'm willing to give some of these guys a break, and they're college students anyway. Obviously, we're sitting here as just a few years older than these guys, judging them. I'm not going to judge them too harshly. But Duke's a guy who I don't think has hit that next level as consistently as we expected him to.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. These guys are college players, but when you play on national television, you do objectify yourself to critique. And if you want to play at the NBA, you have to be prepared for critique. Now, we're not by any means or by any standards the one to be giving critique, but I think we've watched a fair amount of basketball to give our thoughts and opinions. It's not set in stone. But with David Duke, I think the word to describe him right now is overwhelmed, and this rings back to when he was a freshman and he was trying to run the point, and everyone said that it was an underwhelming year for him and that Reeves was really the better recruit and the better player, blah, 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 all because Duke couldn't get going on offense. And then his sophomore year, we move him off the ball, and what happens? The beginning of his junior year, he's off the ball, and what happens? The problem is I don't think Ed Cooley or the coaching staff, for instance, has enough trust in Allen Breed to run the point alone without Bynum or Duke on the floor. And the example from this game, the Connecticut game that I want to bring up, is it was some point in the second half. It's Breed and Duke in the backcourt, Reeves, I think, Horkler, and Watson. It might have been early on. Duke has the ball at the top of the key, right? Watson was just double-teamed. He kicked it out to Breed, who kicked it up to Duke at the top of the key, right? Watson's double-teamed, and Reeves is wide open on the wing calling for the ball. What happens? Duke pump fakes and drives and gets blocked, and it's a turnover. Well, well could have or no, excuse me. It wasn't a turnover. He dumped it off to Horkler, who got fouled on the dunk, right? But then Horkler only makes one of the free throws. So that's a 1-point possession right there. Because Duke tried to create a shot for himself and then went to Horkler as the failsafe. You had Reeves wide open on the wing. Very rarely does Reeves miss that wide open wing three. Very rarely. But
Mhm.
instead of passing the ball like a point guard, Duke made the decision to score for himself, which is fine, right? Normally that's fine when Duke is playing the two, but when you have Duke who's one, you see he's resetting at the top of the key. He's trying to facilitate what to do. He's trying to figure out what am I going to do with the offense. Decides that he's going to take it himself and misses the completely wide open guy. This is what happens when you have him trying to run the point and also trying to score for himself. Now, listen, if that's Allen Breed at the top of the key, Jared Bynum, Luwan Pipkins, Kyron Carr, if that's a true point guard, they would survey the floor and use court vision to understand where the guys are. Instead, Duke thinks he wants to create the shot for himself. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't think it's a fluke that the only field goal he hit in the first half was with Bonham on the floor, where they had Duke post up Bouknight along the baseline in a position where he could hit the turnaround jumper or kick back out to Bynum to reset. And that was a really good look for him. I'm surprised they didn't go back to more of that, but I think you have kind of a chicken and the egg problem with this team when it comes to mentality and execution, where things start to get tough and the guys start to lose their mentality a little bit. And when you lose that, when you're not as locked in, you think a little bit more when you're trying to make plays and you're thinking before you act, which if you're playing basketball, if you're trying to do that, you're going to play a little bit slower. So what happens? You don't create as much separation. And then when you don't create as much separation, the passing lanes get smaller, your shooting windows get tighter, and all of that becomes more difficult. So you miss more shots, you miss more opportunities, and you get a little bit worse in your mentality. And I know I used a Patriots analogy a couple episodes ago. I'm going to go back to that for a second because I know we have Patriots fans that
I was
listen.
gonna bring up this analogy for you, Matt.
Well, I'm going to actually use a different Patriots analogy
Oh,
because this is a Patriots player who I know a lot of our listeners are probably familiar with. Wide receiver N'Keal Harry. Joe, I'll fill you in on this. He was the first round pick for the Patriots 2 years ago, and he's been a bust through 2 seasons. He was an incredibly athletic player in college. He gets to the NFL, and he can't separate from anybody. He looks lethargic on the field. A big reason for that is the mental side of things. He's still trying to figure out what's going on. So he's clearly thinking about things before he acts. And because of that, he just plays like a different athlete than what he was in college. That's no different. It's the same in any sport. If you don't have it locked in mentally and you're thinking before you act, you will not be as good of an athlete. And if you aren't as good of an athlete, everything gets more difficult.
yeah. I mean, I, I don't know if I buy into the argument that we're not as good of athletes as other players in the Big East, especially when it comes to Duke and Watson. I think David Duke is a fine athlete, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think we've seen him put players in in a body bag so far this season. Kobe McEwen, Aaron Thompson. I mean, even some could say Marcus Zagorowski in that matchup. Like David Duke has proven himself as an athlete, and so has Nate Watson. I mean, Nate Watson has played with the best of them. He owned Mamu Kelishvili in the big matchup at Seton Hall way back when in December. But I think there is some truth to what you're saying. That I don't know if we have enough athletes to compete, and I think that's where the discrepancy lies. Duke and
Yeah,
Watson are competitive Big East athletes. There's no really counter argument against that. They have off nights, but there's no counter argument that they can't compete in the conference. I think once you go past Duke and Watson, Reeves is shaky at best. And then below that, there's really no one. Breed is making a case for himself. Horkler is making a case for himself. But really, there's been no consistency from any guys off of the bench to say we are worthy of the Big East accolades. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, in your spot, like Reeves is a top 50 recruit for a reason. He has a fantastic athletic profile. Gant, right there with Bouknight, he has an incredible athletic profile. But these guys haven't really been able to figure it out consistently. And I think with Gant more so than Reeves, I think Reeves is a lot more technical than anything else. But with Gant, he just kind of looks mentally overwhelmed by everything. at the moment, at least. And that's kind of how the whole team looks.
Gant it's so frustrating because in the final minutes of the second half, he was teetering on playing like really, really, really elite basketball. Like he was playing really well on defense, and offensively he had that nice little bucket, and got the N1, but then he bricks the free throw. Like I think that's a mental thing right there. You're completely right because he teeters, and he's teetered all season on playing really well and breaking out and having an all-out overall great performance. But then he also makes some really, really, really terrible mental errors that the likes of a first semester freshman would make. So you're right. Like there's a mentality thing that comes with these guys.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's kind of been the story all season long. There's a lot of guys who just still have untapped potential. And then on the flip side, you got a guy like Nate Watson. I mean, he had 2 fouls early, so he never really got into a groove. But in the second half, I mean, Nate Watson, he only had 2 points in the second half, 1 of 5 from the field, missed both of his free throws. He had 5 rebounds. He stepped up on the glass a little bit in the second half, and he played 16 minutes, so that's part of it. But just how often have we seen them try to get Watson going at the beginning of a second half? It seemed like they weren't really drawing up plays for him. They didn't try to body anybody in the paint. There wasn't really a game plan for a large stretch of the second half like there was at home in the Seton Hall game.
I feel like whenever Watson is double teamed in the first half, we fail to try and get him out of it. We think, oh, all right, that's it. Watson's done. We saw it at Butler when we played at Butler. They double teamed Watson, and then in the second half, we didn't really draw up any plays for him. Instead, we went with the 3-ball game, and look how that turned out. And we lost by 6 that game.
Yeah. And one of the things we talked about, too, when they double Watson the last couple games, he's gotten better at passing out of it. And they like to do this look where they'll put Reeves on the perimeter on the same side as Watson. If Watson gets doubled, they kick out to Reeves for the 3. We didn't see that once tonight. Where was that? That's been effective. They never went to it. Why are you not going to that? We know it works right now. You got to try some of this stuff.
Yeah, I just there are some really, really mind-boggling decisions with this team, and I think it's unfortunate because the opportunity ahead, there's still opportunity. I mean, so it's either we're going to take it or we're not going to take it, but the profile of this team to this point in the season is not convincing enough for fans or for bracket analysts to even think that we will take this opportunity. Everyone has us written off. Everyone has had us written off in the past before, so we've been in this spot. But fans always had it in their heart. Like last season, we always said it was a possibility to go on that 6-game win streak. We always said it. We said it jokingly at times, but we knew it was a possibility. We knew that this year was a possibility as well. But the team has played so inconsistently and so inconsistently tough and so inconsistently defensive that you really you have to be honest with yourself that this team realistically is probably not going to go to the NCAA tournament, and that Duke and Reeves as juniors in this program will have not set 1 foot on the floor of an NCAA tournament game, and Nate Watson will have only played in 1 game in his entire Providence career.
Yeah. And if you want to take a look at what the national perception is of Providence right now, I don't know. I sent this to you at one point, Joe, but Russell Steinberg, he's a writer over at Mid-Major Madness over at SB Nation, tweeted out near the end of the game, quote, "Wow, Providence might not even get the chance to be embarrassed on the first Thursday afternoon of the tournament this year." That's the national profile of the Friars right now. We are so far removed from a top 10 ranked matchup or whatever it was at the Dunk that the Friars played against Xavier all those years ago with Chris Dunn. This is how far the program is. And the reality is in college basketball, you're never that far away. A program with the resources that the Friars do is one recruit, one series of lucky bounces away from completely rewriting the narrative. And that's something that can happen over the next 3 games. The season is not over. It's clear that this team has talent, but they have not been able to put it together for stretches. The longest win streak this year is 3 games, and one of those was at home against Fairleigh Dickinson. The longest win streak against Power 6 conference opponents is 2 games. This team is inconsistent, talented but inconsistent, lacks leadership on the floor. and it's clearly missing the senior class from last year. I hope Watson and Horker come back, because if they do, we're in a really good spot for next year. But that I have no idea the likelihood of that happening. And without that, you're looking at a team next year that's still probably going to have the same leadership issues and is going to still have talent but play inconsistently, because these are the guys we have on the team. And that a lot of the guys we're talking about that have played inconsistently for their entire careers in Providence. There's no reason to think that's all of a sudden going to turn around.
Yep. So looking ahead here, the next 3 scheduled games are at home against Xavier, on the road at St. John's, and then at home against Villanova. So at this point in time, we have lost to every team in the conference, except for DePaul. DePaul's
Yes.
the only outlier. But other than DePaul, we've lost to every team in the conference. So now the game is, you're either going to get swept or you're going to split. Personally, I'd like to do the latter. I'd like to split with everyone and sweep DePaul, but we have no opportunities to sweep anyone else, but every opportunity to get swept by 3 teams.
Xavier, St. John's, Villanova have all already beaten Providence.
Now, with Xavier, I don't think they are capable of sweeping us. I actually think they are the biggest catfish of an NCAA tournament team right now, and Cap and all those Xavier guys that we interact with on Twitter are probably not going to like to hear this, but quite honestly, I think Xavier's hiding from games, and if Selection Sunday comes and they played 75% of the, or not less, 60% of their scheduled conference games, I don't think they're going to get a high seed in the tournament. They might be lucky to get a play-in game. They passed the eye test with respect to record and eligibility with respect to 13 games played. But quite honestly, they have not played enough conference games to actually say this is a good resume, we're coming in.
Yeah, and as we record this right now, Xavier's playing St. John's. By the time you're listening, you'll have the result of that game. But that's talking about a massive game. That's 2 teams that are bubble teams. If Xavier loses that, then they're going to go from a team where everybody thinks they're good and in to being on the bubble. And if St. John's loses, that's pretty much any hope they have of making the tournament gone. That's an incredibly massive game in terms of bubble stuff. But right now, the Friars are right there with kind of Marquette. The Friars are ahead of Marquette when it comes to record. But when you talk about expectations, it's Providence and Marquette, and that's 2 teams that are just disappointing. And at least the Friars have shown more heart and more toughness than Marquette has, and are a more complete team. But also, the expectations in Providence were higher than they were out in Milwaukee.
Yeah, we were projected to finish 3rd in conference, and we're sitting at 7th. That's not very good. This is also the second time in 3 seasons that we've been projected 3rd and have been sitting around that 6th, 7th spot. The 2018-2019 season, we were projected top 3 in the conference, and the same thing happened.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, the Friars are 1 loss away from having a losing record in conference play this year, too. So certainly a disappointing season, but not over yet. As we said, this team is inconsistent. You never know which team's going to show up. If the team that showed up against UConn the first time, or out at Creighton, or at home against Butler, or at Seton Hall, those are some really good performances the Friars have turned in this year. At TCU, a really good performance the Friars turned in this year. If that team shows up for any of the last 3 games, they will at least be competitive. If the team that shows up tonight shows up in those, then you're going to see losses. And there's really no telling which one's going to show up. The stakes were high tonight. The Friars had every opportunity and every reason to come out with effort, with their hair on fire, and they didn't. Doesn't really seem to follow a rhyme or a reason to when they show up. So you just got to wait and see. That's...
Yeah, no, you're right. Now that I'm thinking ahead, if we lose any of the next 3 games, we basically have to count on winning the Big East tournament to get in.
Yeah. as things stand right now, I think you need to win the final 3 and probably win at least 1, if not 2, in the Big East tournament to have a shot at going to the NCAA tournament. And
And if we keep up if we're consistent with the play that we produced tonight, which is poor defensive effort and lackluster offense, we're looking at another Wednesday night Big East tournament game. So the road to the NCAA tournament just gets increasingly more difficult for a team that it really shouldn't be so difficult for.
exactly. Because I mean, and even if the Friars win the next 3, they're still probably looking at that, and things get a little bit tougher when that Wednesday game becomes an almost can't win game because you're probably playing against DePaul or Georgetown or some team like that, and the win doesn't really gain you anything as much as the loss hurts you in terms of tournament resume. All the win gains you is the opportunity to play another game to get a better opponent. That's like you're playing a game against a team that's worse than you just for the opportunity to play a Villanova or a Creighton, so you can hope you can try to beat them. That's the position that you put yourself in by playing this way.
And we're almost at the point right now too where a win over Villanova at home, arguably it's going to be a top 10 ranked Villanova, isn't even the kind of win that's going to seal the deal for you. You know what I mean?
No, I mean
it'll be fun, like, because obviously everyone in Friartown hates Villanova. It'll be fun and it'll be rah rah, but it's not going to be like a you made it kind of win because there's still going to be work left to do.
Exactly.
You're still going to have to chip away at the Big East tournament.
Exactly, and like at this point last season, the Friars were at 53 in the KenPom rankings. They're at 73 right now. And KenPom and metrics like that are going to play an important part of measuring teams this year because there's less non-conference play. So they're going to turn towards a lot of these metrics to help evaluate teams. And that's just 73 is nowhere near good enough to get it done. St. John's is 7 spots higher than you, and they're barely on the bubble right now. Xavier is at 52. I mean, UConn's at 35 in the KenPom, and they're kind of a bubble team right now. At least they were before tonight. So you're at a point where you got to win 3 in a row to get onto the bubble, basically.
Yeah, it's 3 in a row to be a bubble team, and then I'm gonna say 2 or 3 more depending on where you land when the Big East tournament starts. If you start off on Wednesday, you're going to need 3 wins to get you to Saturday. If you start off Thursday, you're going to need 2 wins to get you to Saturday. So basically, you need to win the next 3, and then you have to at the very least, make it to Friday of the Big East tournament to feel, like you're gonna get in. If you win the next 3 and then make it to Saturday, win or lose the Big East championship, you win the next 3 and you get to the Big East championship, you can feel comfortable. It's the same.
Probably.
It's the 2017-2018 Kyron Cartwright led season all over again, where you're going to need some spectacular tournament run to boost your chances.
Yeah.
And that would even get us like a 10 seed.
Yeah. And that was a team that had that win at home over Villanova too.
Right. And a win over Xavier at home too.
Yeah. Yeah. Xavier was a top 10 team, then 2 top 10 home wins, which the Friars were. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Friars would arguably have close to that. If you beat Villanova at home, Creighton on the road, that's close. But yeah, there's no doubt the talent's there. I just have zero confidence in the team's ability to put together that talent for any extended stretch. I think this is a good point to wrap up. We kind of talked before this episode about who our player of the game would be, who'd get our game ball. We don't usually give one out for a loss, but we felt like it was worth giving one out today. Joe, I'll let you tell the listeners who we picked and why.
Allen Breed. He is the only player on the Providence roster that showed up today and showed up in a meaningful way. And when I say meaningful, I mean he was playing till the very last whistle until Ed Cooley had to call him off from trying to foul. That's meaningful. Everyone else had hung their heads and just slumped back on defense and was going to let Connecticut dribble the ball out. Allen Breed was still trying to foul until Cooley called him off. So I think that kid is going to be something special in the next 2-3 years. He's really going to be a nice piece for us. He's coming on, and he, as a freshman, has taken his role. I mean, by the horns, man. He saw the opportunity and he took it. I don't know if Bynum starts the rest of the season, if Breed keeps up playing like this.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a surprise either that Duke only played 32 minutes and saw in the first half there were long stretches where he came out. Part of that was foul trouble, but part of that is that he may not have been one of the best 5 players on the floor, at least for stretches of the game. I mean, Breed and his points Bynum seemed to outplay him. So, I mean, we'll see what the rotation looks like going forward. It seems like they kind of know who the guys are anyway. It's just the guys aren't always showing up. UConn is a bad matchup for the Friars. So we'll see what they do against Xavier. But Friars fall in this one 73-61 at UConn. Bouknight and Martin each with 18 points for the Huskies. Danny Hurley gets his second win now, 2-6 against Ed Cooley. Breed leads the Friars with 14, Duke with 11, Reeves and Horkler with 9, Gant and Watson each with 6. Watson led the team with 6 rebounds. Horkler and Gant each had 5, and Gant led the team with 2 assists, tied with Bynum and Duke. I think that says a lot that the team leader in assists has 2. It's the kind of night it was for the Friars. Nothing going well, really, at either end of the floor in any way. No breaks to speak of in a positive manner for the Friars in this one. Falling back to 500 on the season, 7-9 in conference play. They'll pick it up after a long break next week against Xavier next Wednesday. We will have content for you between now and then, so stay tuned to hear what we're going to have coming to you. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at The Flex Hoops. Follow me at Matt St. Dream, Joe at Joe Howie. Make sure you are staying up to date with our content. Follow us wherever you are listening to this to get the newest episodes. As always, for Joe Howie, I'm Matt St. Jean. Thank you for listening.